In this lecture, I want to explore how you would go about reusing components. Right now, we're only displaying one person. The process is quite simple. First, we're going to create some JSX that will contain the overall application. Then, we'll simply call the person element multiple times inside that element. Let me show you what I mean. Right below the function, I'm going to create a constant named app. The value for this will be JSX. It'll be multi-line, so I'm going to add in my parentheses. Inside this, I'm going to call the person component twice. Once again, you can't call this as a function. It must be called as an element. Then I'm going to replace the person component inside the render function with the app variable. At this point, you may be thinking, what is the difference between storing JSX inside a variable and inside a function? Well, I'll show you in just a moment, but just keep going with me here. Inside the command line, run the command npm start. Right after running this command, you'll receive an error. The error is telling us we can't have two elements on the same level. This is another rule with JSX. You can have as many elements as you'd like, but you can only have one root element. To fix this, we'll have to wrap our person components with some div tags. Let's try running the command again. Everything should run smoothly this time. This is a common pitfall beginner developers fall into. Always make sure you only have one root element. There are ways to get around this rule, but we'll explore that later in this course. Go to your browser and view the page. You should see two people being displayed on the page. This is great. We now have a reusable component. The next step is to make the data dynamic. Back inside our script, you'll see that we're using the person function as an element. We just can't pass it in data since we're not calling this function in the traditional manner. So how do we pass in data? React has something called properties. Properties are exactly what they sound like. They're the data or attributes attached to an element. With JSX, we're allowed to create custom attributes that will hold our data. Inside the person elements, I'm going to create two attributes called name and age. This is how you can pass values onto the component function above. To grab these values, we'll have to update the person function. All attributes and values are stored inside an object called properties. It's common practice to call this props, but you can name it whatever you want. For now, we'll stick with this naming convention. This object will contain all the values we passed in as attributes. I'm going to replace the name with a pair of curly brackets. This is important to note down. If you want to have dynamic JavaScript in your JSX, then you need to surround it with curly brackets. Inside these curly brackets, I'm going to use the props object and access the attribute name. The name of the attribute will be the name of the property. I will now do this for the age. Just like that, we're now accessing the data dynamically. Let's see if this works. Inside the command line, run the command npm start. You shouldn't receive any errors at this point. Go ahead and refresh the page. The list of people should be displaying. Just like that, we've created our first complete application. Admittedly, it isn't anything spectacular. However, this should be enough to get you comfortable with Gutenberg. The Gutenberg development team have already taken care of the more difficult parts of the editor. All you have to do is load in the right files and use the right functions. I also want to remind you that you don't have to be a master of React. The only things you really need to know are JSX, components, and properties. If you have a basic understanding of those things, then you should be fine. I'll be sure to point out any other React features I may have missed if they arise in the next section.